We've been looking at how we use electricity. Today we're going to follow that path of electricity from our house all the way back to the power plant. And this is just a quick version of what we did in class. Draw this along with me as I do it. So on the outside of your house, there's a little, usually round dial that spins, and it counts, it measures how much electricity comes into your house. That meter is read once a month, maybe once every 2 months by the power company, and they send you a bill for how much electricity you use. The power that comes into your house usually comes from overhead, could come from underground. But out on the street in front of your house, there is a utility pole. Maybe should label that meter. That's your meter, electrical meter. You can call this a utility pole. You can call it a power pole if it has the power line hooked to it. Now the power line doesn't hook directly to the pole. It's hooked to this thing that looks like a 5-gallon bucket. And that's a pretty amazing device, actually. With no moving parts, it does something pretty important. The power that comes into your house is 120 volts. V is the symbol for volts. Voltage is a measure of kind of the electrical pressure. If you think of a water hose, you could have lots of water coming out, or you could have the water under high pressure. It could come out really hard, or it could come out with a lot of water. And that's pressure versus volume, and electricity kind of has that same two ways of measuring it. There's voltage, which is kind of like the pressure, and then there's current, which is kind of like the volume. And usually when pressure goes up, or always when pressure goes up, amperage goes down. When amperage goes up, volume goes down. And that's what happens inside this little bucket on the pole here. I'm just gonna show you a bigger version of it. There is a kind of a D-shaped piece of metal, and the wires from your house are wrapped around this side. And the wires from the power plant are wrapped around the other side. And electricity flows through here. And remember, there's this connection between electricity and magnets. Magnets make electricity, electricity makes magnets. When we wrap wire around a piece of metal, we turn that into a magnet. If we run electrical current through this, it makes this into a magnet. And because it's alternating current, it's going in this direction, in this direction, this direction, this direction. In the United States, it switches directions 55 times a second, or 55 cycles a second. Because it's a changing electrical field here, it creates a changing magnetic field in this piece of metal. And that changing magnetic field makes a current flow in this wire. So the current flowing in this wire induces a current to flow in that wire. Because we have more wraps on this side, the voltage goes down, but the current goes up. It transforms the electricity. It transforms it from 120 volts on this side to maybe 2,400 volts on this side. And there's a reason for that. High voltages can spark long distances, like 2,400 volts could probably spark about that far with just jump through the air, where 110 volts really doesn't. So these lower voltages are safe to have in your house. The higher voltages aren't. However, high voltages travel more efficiently through the power lines. So you can't send 120 volts current or 120 volt electricity long distances through a power line. Even an extension cord, you should almost never go more than, say, 100 feet on an extension cord. You can't just keep adding extension cords with this low voltage. You'll lose too much, the cable will get hot, and whatever you're trying to run on the other end, especially if it needs a lot of power, isn't gonna work well. So it's not safe to have these voltages in your house. So we have a step down transformer mounted outside of your house. This is called a step down transformer. And I didn't plan that well. It steps down the voltage to a safe level in your house. But that low level wouldn't travel the long distances, because this line, the power line coming to that pole, may go 10 miles. And so that line, we need a higher voltage. And it might not go that far. It may only go to another substation. Somewhere near your neighborhood is this thing. It's usually surrounded by a chain link fence. And inside that is another one of these transformers. Usually has a gravel surrounding it. They don't let the weeds grow up. If you walk by it, you probably hear a humming noise, because in there's another step down transformer. And these wires are going to go into that, and wires coming in the other side with lots of wraps, because the wires coming into that are high voltages. They come in on big tall towers, and they have insulators hanging off of them, and these wires go up to there. These are high voltage transmission lines, kind of dangerous to be around, because now we're not talking not talking 2400 volts, but more like 240,000 volts. Because these power lines may come hundreds of miles. Maybe it comes from Green Bay or something. And to travel that far, even 2400 volts isn't high enough to travel efficiently. We need really high voltage, maybe even 500,000 volts. You can, if you walk under these, you can hear them crackling. Because those come from the power plant. And so we'll continue these lines to the power plant. Now, that kind of voltage isn't safe to have inside the power plant either. So outside the power plant, there's going to be another transformer, but this one is going to be a step up transformer. And it's going to be kind of just the opposite. The windings are going to be on the other side. And because inside the power plant, maybe we want only like 6,000 volts coming into that. So now the question is, how do we make this electricity, this flow of electrons? We know energy is not created or destroyed, it only changes form. So we don't just we make the electricity, but we have to make it from some other kind of energy. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. Remember, electricity makes magnets and magnets make electricity. So what we have to do is maybe use spinning magnets. If we spin a magnet inside a coil of wire, it produces electrical current. So on the end of this wire, we have a coil, and that spins inside a magnet, or we have a magnet that spins. I'll draw a horseshoe magnet with a north pole and a south pole. And when we spin that, if we spin that magnet around that coil of wire, it creates an electric current. Now the question is, what do we spin that magnet with? We could just put a fan blade on it, stick that whole thing up on a pole. That would be wind energy. This part is called a turbine. This part is called a generator. We could blow water on it. Like we could have a dam over here and block the water and send the water through a pipe to spin that. We'd call that hydroelectric. Or we could use steam to spin it. If we had a boiler, we have this container of water with a pipe coming out of it that's going to blow onto that turbine. And if we boil this water, it takes up more space, it blows out this pipe, makes the turbine spin. Now the question is, what do we boil the water with? We could have a fire, and maybe we burn coal or oil or natural gas. All of these are fossil fuels. We could even have a nuclear reaction heating this water. So far, we've only been able to harness nuclear fission, where big atoms break into smaller ones. We haven't been able to harness nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion would be awesome if we can get that under control. This water then would turn from steam after it gives up the energy. It would turn back to a liquid, and we'd go send it back into the tank to get reheated. We could use heat from the earth. We could send these pipes down deep into the earth where it's hot. That's called geothermal, using the earth as heat. We could use the sun. We could have the sun shining on that tank of water and heating the water. Heat from the sun is called solar thermal. And then there's another kind of solar that bypasses all of this stuff, doesn't really use moving parts. PV solar uses just a solar panel, and the sun shines on that and kicks out an electron. It's kind of cool because there's no moving parts. There's some downsides too. And I should point out, each of these has good ideas, good reasons to go with geothermal, and there's bad reasons. Every coal, there's good reasons to have coal power plants, and there's some bad reasons. And we'll look into that next. Hope that made sense. And keep in mind, this is just in general. These voltages are different for each system, but it's always, you make the electricity, you step up the voltage so it can go long distances, and then as you get closer to your ultimate destination, you can drop the voltage until it's safe enough to be into your house.